We'll just give everyone another minute or so before we start. Hey, it's right on 11. Shall we make a start? Yep.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar as well, where we'll be stepping through the implementing the new AI usage framework. For those of you that I have not had a chance to meet, I'm Selena Attack, Director and Principal Consultant at Tangelo Advice Consulting, and our business ultimately provides proactive compliance and governance consulting services to financial services, licensees and advice businesses to ensure that they safely grow their businesses. Today, I'm joined by Peter Vaughan, Joint Managing Director at the Finura Group. So Peter and the Finura team advise some of Australia and UK's leading wealth management companies on their technology, strategy and execution. Welcome, Pete.
Morning.
And also Fraser Jack, founder of the Cyber Collective, who helps financial professionals who are unsure about what to do about cybersecurity through a cyber transformation framework so they can feel confident about protecting their clients' private details. Welcome to you, Fraser.
Thanks for having me.
Very important topics we'll be covering today. So we will try and keep this session as interactive as possible. So for those of you on the line, please feel free to utilize the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll try and address as many of the questions as we can. If there's something that we can't get to, again, we'll just take it on notice and come back to the respective individuals that are asking those questions. So to start off with, the purpose of today's session is that we're ultimately seeing AI technology evolving. And whilst it's creating potential for efficiencies, we're also identifying some business risks with it. And through our respective organisations, we were finding that businesses were often taking a one-dimensional lens without considering the risks, efficiencies, security, and the ethical implications of AI and what that meant moving forward. So as part of today's session, we really wanted to focus in on the opportunities for innovation, but ensuring that we're also balancing that that innovation with any potential risks that we also need to consider. And again, I think it's also important for us to highlight that even if as business owners, and I'm sure there's a number of business owners on the line joining us today, even if you feel as though your business isn't necessarily using AI, I think we can guarantee you that your staff ultimately are. So for us, it was important to establish a bit of a framework, and again, our respective businesses have come together to put forward our respective insights and intel into developing this free AI framework suitable for AFSLs as well as advice businesses. And we really wanted to make sure that we've established a bit of a framework that that could be utilised by businesses to, again, factor in, collectively effective use of AI, manage that with ethically using AI and the regulatory boundaries that it needs to be used within as well. So again, the framework is free to download through the cybercollective.com.au/AI framework. And the framework comprises an AI policy, which ultimately sets the guardrails for your business and your staff in how AI can be utilised in your business. And we've also provided a risk assessment checklist as well as a process for assessing new AI tools in your business.
Can I just add something to that?
Please.
Just on the framework, it's a template. It's a Word document template. It's completely editable. When you download it, you'll see that it's not just a theory. It's also a practical use for your business, so you can pretty much start implementing the policies and the process in your business straight away.
Thanks for that, Fraser. So before we begin, Pete, I might just throw to you to start off with what actually is AI? Is it new technology or a solution? Is it a feature of an existing solution? How do we actually define it?
Yeah, so AI's been around for a long time, but what has really brought AI into the um, our world in terms of what's accessible AI, I suppose I would call it, was the release of ChatGPT a couple of years ago. I still remember the day actually it was released. I was presenting to a group of advisors and somewhat foolishly decided to do a demo of it, and I could just see the heads, completely spin, and we went down quite a rabbit hole of what AI could actually do for us. So, and look, from I would imagine most people on this call have done some sort of experimentation with AI, probably using ChatGPT, and probably since then we've seen just an unprecedented flooding of AI solutions into our daily lives. It doesn't matter whether we're using apps like Teams. Here we are today with Copilot. Apps on our phones now have AI. I noticed that my WhatsApp and my Instagram and everything have all this AI, and I'm not really sure why it's there, but it's there. My Samsung phone now has AI on it. Again, I don't really know what to do with it. So we've just been, we do use that term quite deliberately, flooded with AI, and it's one of those technologies where it's been rolled out just everywhere as fast as humanly possible. And I certainly can't remember a time in my 20 years of my professional life where we've had this sort of situation where we've all been provided with free AI in many cases and not a hell of a lot of guidance on what to do with it, and certainly not a lot of thought on what are the risks and issues around it. So I think this is why we're here today, right, Celine? Is because there is no one setting the scene as to how we're doing this, and we're already starting to see some unintended consequences flow through with our clients around AI usage, and this is a really important time, I think, to take a step back, deep breath, and think thoughtfully about how we're going to use this amazing technology. It is amazing, I will say that, but it is still very early days.
Yep. Definitely. Fraser, is there anything else you wanted to add? Yep.
Yeah, I think exactly right. I think the concept of intelligence, computing intelligence has been around a long time. We're talking about these things now called large language models, which is searching through, which are the generative. There's a lot of predictive elements in it. And so there's a lot of tools off the back of what the technology brings. And we've got to think about the tools probably separately from the technology itself and how it works. But I think, obviously, as we talked about before, there's a lot of things that can be great for your business, but there's also a lot of pain points. So yeah, as we go through this, I think we're going to try and highlight a lot of those things. I also think about it, it's really important to think about the terms of artificial and intelligence and automation and all these other types of things, understanding what the words are, not that we just get carried away with the AI, because it's a large topic, I guess. And I also like the concept, and I like to bring in the concept of things that are artificial in a relationship-based business may not be great, but things that are intelligent in a relationship-based business might be excellent. So you've got to try and make sure that we're using, and we'll get to the ethical parts of this, the artificial part, making sure that we can explain what that artificial bit means.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely get into a bit more detail as we step through the session. I think to set the scene, there's currently no specific AI regulations, right? But there are existing regulatory requirements that do apply, especially in the financial services remit. So obviously the Corporations Act still governs everything that we do. So if you are utilizing AI in the provision of advice, etc., it doesn't obviate the need to ensure that you're meeting your AFSL and advice obligations. If you're an advice business, your code of ethics ultimately governs your conduct. So it's no different to how AI is utilized in your business. Again, I'm sure we've got a number of business owners attending today as well. So there's the overlay of your director duties as well to exercise due care and skill in how AI is utilized in your business. Privacy Act, Fraser, I know we'll touch on this further down the track, but I mean, there's current consultation on the existing Privacy Act, which is now considering things around the use of AI and cyber, etc. And there's the overarching consumer protections as well. So whilst there's no specific AI regulations, we are still operating within a world where there is additional, existing regulatory requirements that we still need to abide by. Pete, I know we've been talking about AI washing as well as maybe thinking through some of the overseas approach. I mean, I suspect, overseas, maybe things are a little bit more mature over there than what they are here. Can you maybe touch on what the concept of AI washing?
Yeah, so there's two forms of AI washing. The first form, which we're seeing a hell of a lot of right now, is where companies, particularly technology companies, are making claims that they have AI capability as part of their stack or their offering or any unique intellectual property in what they provide, when in fact they're broadly using quite widely available AI solutions like ChatGPT to just wrap their products in. It's important to understand these businesses are not building their own AI; they're just leveraging someone else's. And there's a lot of startups, particularly, that are prone to doing this, and where you have less savvy investors, they think they're investing in an AI company, but they're not. They're actually just investing in a company which resells someone else's AI. So that's probably the first part of AI washing. We're also seeing AI used a lot in larger company public disclosures, even here locally. One of our major platform businesses dropped the word AI 21 times in their last investor update. Yeah. We're seeing it. Apple had a big pop yesterday announcing some AI features and what they're doing. And really, look, many of these for these businesses is just trying to tie a narrative together. Either AI is going to grow their revenue substantially, or they're going to use AI to substantially reduce their cost bases without a lot of substance behind actually what does that mean. So that's sort of AI washing in one element. There is another part of AI washing though, which is around predominantly in the world of wealth management, which is specific to us. So in the US, the ASIC equivalent, the SEC, has actually already prosecuted two independent wealth advisors in the US for claiming that their investment processes or policies used AI when in fact they didn't. So where there's been misleading claims of AI usage by investment advisors, that where those claims have not been substantiated, the SEC has actually prosecuted those firms, which has caused enormous brand and reputational damage to those businesses. So I think that's a little bit of a shot over the bow and a warning sign to any IFAs or even licensees that want to sort of stretch the truth a little bit and claim that maybe their managed account has some unique AI capabilities through it. And if that's not substantiated, you could find yourself under the gun of the regulator.
Interesting. Fraser, anything else for you to add on that, on the landscape itself?
Yeah, just I mean, obviously that washing part, again, it's about, an AI is about saying, it covers so many different things and so many different, so just saying AI is like saying financial services, in my opinion. It's a big, broad, like you've got to get specific. And I think the onus is on the director of the business to understand specifically what they're using and how they're using it, and to be able to then communicate that rather than just using an AI as a broad brush. So we've got to be very careful.
Yeah. The other thing I haven't seen, Celine, much evidence or discussion about is just what are our potential duties of disclosure to customers or clients in this context around how we use AI in our business. You don't see responsible use of AI policies and websites. We all have privacy statements with very little references to AI on those, and probably something keen to explore today is just, well, what are our ethical obligations over and above the law as directors and business owners, as professional advisors, to disclose to our clients that we may use AI in certain aspects of our business.
And that's ultimately what we've tried to cover off as part of the framework as well. So, I mean, we've been seeing, some generic AI policies being, that can be utilized, but we really wanted to develop something that was specific to financial services and financial advice. And I think that overlay of the, the code of ethics that governs the industry, as well as obviously the stringent regulatory requirements that we have as well, that key point around transparency and disclosure to clients is certainly an area that we've tried to cover off on as part of this framework as well.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to what would you expect being the client? What would you expect your doctor to tell you about the AI that they're using, or would you expect your accountant to say that, how they're using artificial intelligence in the business? And is it intelligence that's good for you, or is it something that is artificial? And I use the magician analogy in this space to say, well, if somebody's doing something to you, then it doesn't feel very good. So if you're on the receiving end of a magic trick, you might go, that's great, but I didn't know how that worked. Versus if you're on the inside of the trick, if the magician actually then turns around and shows you how they did the trick, then you're on the inside of that, and you can then go, oh, that's actually quite a great, it's quite an intelligent thing to be part of. But it's going back to those ethical framework. Are you doing it to them, or are they included in the conversation or the trick or the story? And if they're included on the inside of the joke, if you like, then it's about that. That's the level of disclosure I think that probably feels appropriate for the client relationships that you have.
Yeah. Let's touch on AI usage. I mean, broadly speaking, I think we've kind of classified the way in which AI can be utilized within business for efficiency, business operations, as well as client engagement. So when we're talking about efficiency, it's ultimately trying to automate tasks that are relatively repetitive and ultimately freeing up, your employees to focus more on the complex and strategic and more value add functions of the business. When you're looking at the business operations, it's ultimately, AI can actually provide insights from large data sets. So it's providing business insights. And I think we're ultimately seeing where AI can also be used to improve risk management as well, where you're identifying patterns, compliance issues, etc. So some of those red flags that you can then proactively take action on, as well as client engagement. I think this is probably an area that we're seeing most of AI usage being deployed is, personalizing the customer experience, use of chatbots, etc. And I think as well as both the client engagement, I think we're seeing some businesses use it for their own employee engagement as well. So that's broadly speaking the three key themes that we're seeing. Pete, from an AI usage in advice tech, what are some of the themes that you're seeing come through from a Finura perspective?
Yeah, plenty. So I'll just take over here, Celine.
Sure.
So so we're seeing. I just can't remember a time where we've had so many inquiries from both our existing and prospective clients about different AI tools that they're exploring. I did a couple of trips around Australia the last few weeks, and I seem to be hearing of a new AI widget every week, a new one that I haven't heard of before, both homegrown and international products that are looking to distribute here in Australia. And, our sort of other consulting firms we collaborate in the UK and the US have said the same thing, that those markets are absolutely being flooded with AI tech, which has been, targeted for financial advisors and wealth management. Look, it is the Wild West, is what I would say at the moment. So we're seeing two key things play out. So when we look at technology, there's sort of a couple of important factors which will determine, firstly, how quickly does a product get built as a bit of software, and how quickly does it get distributed. And AI is this very interesting thing, because believe it or not, the barriers to entry in building AI products is quite low at the moment. So chat GPTs or OpenAI's platform is largely open source. So yes, you pay for it, but it's very easy to build on top of it, and they've built it that way. So it is what we call a decentralized bit of technology. So it's been made quite widely available, and it obviously has a lot of competitors now. So it's got Google's AI, Bard, and it's got and there's other AIs out there like Anthropic and Claude and those sort of ones that are building AI. So we're seeing this huge arms race, and like most things in tech, these big companies are trying to be the platform that people build their AI on top of, rather than actually building specific use cases. And they're almost counting on the fact that there'll be companies out there that will take that generic AI and then build a really specific use case and wrap it into a product from that perspective. But because we've had so much capital build up on the sidelines, as we had a bit of a downturn in technology the last couple of years, there's this pent up demand where venture capitals look thirsty to invest their money somewhere at the moment, and AI is just the thing that everyone's happy to jump on and spend money on. So if I have a company and I put the suffix of my company name is .ai, I probably have a better chance of raising capital at the moment than if I was just to be a generic old tech company. So that's why we're seeing it, and that's why you as advisors and people in the industry are probably feeling a bit overwhelmed with the amount of AI that's coming into them. I've really noticed, even just on my search, using my browser, I'm getting a lot of AI advertising directed at me for whatever reason. It's targeting me as someone that Googles a lot of things in financial services. I'm getting like AI advertising apps on my feed at the moment. So this is kind of why we're seeing what we're seeing. And I've certainly never experienced anything like this. And they're making big promises. Yep. Lots of big promises. And the reason they're probably doing this is that a lot of these businesses have a go hard or go home mentality. In other words, they've got to get their products out to market really fast. They see there's a bit of a war on. They want to be, the dominant provider in that particular space, and they're making some grand promises on the back of that. What we are seeing is really extreme examples. So from promises of, well, we have a file noting app which is purpose built for financial advisors, and it'll give you a wonderful file note, which means you can just record your meeting, upload the file note into your CRM, and you're done. And that's one extreme. The other extreme is you can just plug our tool in with a bunch of client information, and it'll spit out an SOA in a couple of minutes telling you what to do. I mean, they're pretty extreme sort of examples. And the problem is that whilst these are all great ideas in theory, in reality, they're just using pretty generic AI capability via large language models like ChatGPT. And I've used the example of like salt. AI is the salt here, where you're just sprinkling AI on different products and hoping something sticks. This bloke here, Salt Bay, if anyone's never seen him on social media, but he was a huge sensation through COVID. He found a way to charge $1,000 for a steak by just sprinkling some salt off his elbow, was how he did it. And that's what we're seeing with AI right now. I think the tide's going to turn pretty quickly on some of this AI. And what I think is going to be really interesting is that we really see AI as a feature, not a product in itself.
Yeah.
So I think the AI features that'll stick are the ones that are thoughtful product decisions by our existing software providers to implement AI in obvious cases where it makes a hell of a lot of sense. Yes, there's going to be trial and error with this, but I think the way Microsoft's thought about implementing Copilot and things like into things like Teams has been really quite clever, the way they've done it. But they've also done some pretty crappy implementations of Copilot. Like Copilot in Word is not that great, for example. So it's even hit and miss for these large companies. But I would say be really, really careful if you're going to make massive bets, particularly on these things here where you're basically AI tools are promising to remove paraplanners, an instant SOA. I just think we're just not there yet, frankly. So that's from a tech point of view.
Peter, I thought you were going to make the analogy then about adding too much salt to the recipe.
When
it comes to putting salt in the recipe, just the right amount's amazing, but if you oversalt it, it becomes unpalatable.
Yeah, maybe. And I think there are some unintended consequences with this. So we actually had a meeting with an accounting firm this morning that was looking at using one of the AI apps, but what they hadn't thought through is that if AI file noting apps, the generic one, but what they hadn't thought about was the more and more they use that app, they'll become quite dependent on the future. All their client data will be in there. If they ever want to go back to something and find data in 5 years' time, it's going to be in there, as opposed to maybe having it in their Microsoft environment or their primary CRM. So it's just a lot of these things, and a lot of these products are being quite clever about making you dependent on them for the long term by offering you. The usual example is the product's free, but once you get over a certain usage, then you start paying and you're dependent on it effectively. Very common strategy. It's called a freemium strategy for product design, but you could end up in a situation where you've got an app which sits it's an island in your tech stack effectively, but you're dependent on it for the foreseeable future because all your file notes are in there, for example, if you haven't pulled them out. So there's just stuff like that, I think, that's got to be thought through.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, I also have a bit of a problem with products that are free, because if you've got a free product, with a cybersecurity point of view, for example, it costs a lot of money to provide a decent cyber platform, and if you're not paying for a product, they've got to be paying for it some other way. So
exactly.
Yeah, well, our sort of rule of thumb, Finura, is if the product's free, you are the product.
Absolutely. Yep.
So Facebook, those things, your data's been mined effectively. So we survey advisors, guys, around their technology health and how they're thinking about tech. And this benchmarking data we hear is from 133 practices across Australia, so it's a reasonable sample set, we feel. So we're seeing quite reasonable levels of AI interest in the market, although so only a quarter are using AI in obviously some, meaningful way, and 2/3 are probably on the fence, which is what we would typically see in a adoption cycle of any new product or technology. But I would say that the AI one's been a little different because it's been it's been rammed down our throat in many cases, where it's been thrust upon us. But what is interesting is that most businesses still feel they're not fully prepared for AI. So at least we have a conscious incompetence here with AI that we're aware that we don't understand the full picture. And that's really pleasing to see, because even a business like ours that's lives in the world of technology every day, this is all we do, we're by no means experts on AI. We are learning as we go. Every day, OpenAI does a new product release, the new version of ChatGPT. We're all learning again, so anyone that claims they're an expert on this stuff, I think, is a little bit misguided, doesn't fully understand it. So it just feels to me that it's one of these trends where we're on the first year of a very long journey with AI. There's nothing wrong with taking a bit of a step back and see what plays out. It's probably what we're saying, particularly when we're talking about what we do with client data.
Absolutely.
In terms of expectations, I think there's sort of two camps of people who are basically, the majority of people are expecting some incremental productivity lifts from AI, which is a really good North Star, I think, for most people. We find the clients we work with that have used AI successfully, it's sort of more empowered the individual a little bit. It's more been an assistant to the individual doing quite basic jobs or improving their writing or whatever the thing was, but rather than something that's completely game changed the organization and made suddenly they've said, shit, we can serve 300 clients now, because of the per advisor, from that perspective. But obviously, there are a good swag of people who are looking here at cost savings, who do see AI as a cost saving. And the one narrative I am seeing, a troubling narrative, is that we can use AI and remove the paraplanner, has been the one thing I've been seeing. And I feel that's quite flawed. The paraplanners are actually pretty low relative costs in the cost of delivery of advice relative to the value they create. They are in many cases the first and last line of defense in terms of those things. And I reckon that's a pretty foolish, North Star for choosing an AI solution, is to remove your paraplanner costs. So look, that's just the world according to Peter Warren, but I get troubled by that. And I'm seeing that advertising even on some AI products saying reduce your paraplanning costs and all this kind of stuff. Feels a little bit flawed.
Agree. Yeah, there's probably so many other elements within the advice process that could benefit from having AI integration versus right at the end, your paraplanner, which is ultimately the value add. And to your point, from a compliance and governance perspective, a second mechanism to ensure the appropriateness of the advice, etc.
Yeah. In fact, I think paraplanners are probably the ones most likely to use AI to clean up all the crappy data they're provided by advisors and and those sort of things. That they're probably the beneficiaries of AI more than being the target of AI. Is probably how I would phrase. Fraser, I don't know what you think about that, mate, but
I think it's a job for everybody to clean up AI, as in we know the accuracy is not always there yet. We know that if you're the director of the business, or you're their advice provider, or you're the data gatherer, you're ultimately responsible. And in using any tool to do projections, or using any tool in AI, you're always the cleaner upper. And I think this comes back down to, we've opened up ourselves with a whole lot more stuff that we need to clean up. So it's great, we use it, but and I guess paraplanners are in that way, find themselves, or admin people might find themselves in those roles, but I think it's everyone's responsibility.
Which is sort of my point here, right? So AI's at every conference, all these interesting sessions, advisors who are always interested. And honestly, we love the enthusiasm for tech and innovation, but there is a we're hearing more and more thoughts from advisors of saying, oh, we'll just hit everything with the AI stick. That's okay. AI will take care of that. AI will do that. It's a quick fix in some people's heads. And I would suggest that your people in your businesses, your back and middle office staff would be quite dubious and skeptical. If you've got crappy data, you can't get fact finds and good file notes done correctly and clear instructions to your paraplanners, then they're going to be pretty skeptical on any AI tools that you actually try and deploy. The other issue as well is that if you have data in multiple locations, AI will not work for you as well. So, so I think this whole message you send around how we're going to use AI in your business is a really, really important thing, because if you haven't got the basics right, then you could be set up to fail there as well.
I've always said, I think you probably always said this too, Pete, is that you need to find what the problem is, and then you go and find a solution for the problem, not the other way around. Right. I think what AI is, the explosion of new tools has come on as to us to do is to go be mindful of what's out there, because not just because you might be solving a problem, but because because your staff might be seeing what's out there and other people might be seeing what's out there, and everybody's noticing what AI can do in certain areas and then reverting that back. And so I think it's whilst you still need to work out what problem you need to solve and go and solve it, being aware is not such a bad thing of what's out there as well.
Yep. Okay. So just looking at the advice process, just some broad narratives we've got with our clients and where we see potential AI capability is we see a couple of really key obvious places where AI would be useful. So obviously client discovery, fact finding, we absolutely think AI has got a role to play there with recording and transcription software, which is really, really good. Again, we don't trust it blindly though. So we've seen increasingly had some feedback from around the market that some of these AI solutions are quite missing some key elements in fact finding. So I'm sure you'll talk to that, Celine, in a minute, but that is a challenge. So we just can't completely outsource that part of it. Certainly from we see potential long-term opportunity for some of the financial, so strategy and modeling, potentially having some AI capability in there where it can present alternative strategies and scenarios. Frankly, a lot of modeling tools do that already, but we probably see that there's opportunity for some of those solutions to use some AI to potentially nudge the user in certain directions and sort of add some other information potentially, or do some benchmarking around other clients. So there's absolute usage that. Advice implementation, there is absolutely opportunity for AI here. So we know a lot of businesses will have someone literally pouring through SOAs, trying to work out exactly what's happening for a client. And so we know some of the platforms are quite interested in potentially how they can use AI to sort of uncover those next steps, uncover what is exactly happening for this client, and pulling data out of those documents as well. I wouldn't call that necessarily AI. I think part of it's actually just machine learning and scanning your documents, but obviously we see some opportunity there for automation and also client review. There'll be certain aspects where AI will help. We know many businesses that are using AI to help write some investment commentary, or here's a chart, can you just give me a bit of commentary around what this chart's actually telling me, and explain it, put it in a frame of reference that a 5-year-old would understand. There's things that you can do with AI, which is quite cool, which I think will perhaps help businesses who are people who are not necessarily the best communicators or best authors. AI can enormously help them in sort of crafting stories, which I think are more effective for their audience, and help tailoring those stories to audience as well. So I think if creative writing or persuasive writing is not your jam, then I think AI can be a really powerful tool for you to do that from our perspective. Where we see the jury's still out from our perspective on AI is really this whole idea about being able to just give a very limited data set to an AI engine and have it produce a comprehensive set of advice for a client. I think anyone that's ever sat in front of a real client would understand that humans are irrational and unpredictable and often hard to read. And so the real value of great advisors is their ability to tease out a client's what their actual needs really are, what their goals really are, and often thread that line between what a client wants and what they actually need is a real different thing as well. So that is for us, the jury is still out on that side. And even on the advice recommendation side, we have seen a few tools claim to sort of generate AI-driven advice recommendations and strategy recommendations. And in many cases, these aren't AI, they're just algorithms. But in the scenario you're using an AI for that, one of the problems is that AI is still quite probabilistic in nature. So it doesn't necessarily give you a computer says no answer. It'll just make up an answer, often if it doesn't know the right response. And we still live in an industry which likes sort of determined outcomes, likes some consistency in how we deliver things. And I think for a business in providing professional services to clients, it would be quite challenging to put in the same set of data and get really different outcomes because the AI decided to do its own thing that day. I mean, they are real challenges as well.
And there is this minor little thing called best interest duty that our, unfortunately the industry operates within. So I think the whole cookie cutter approach to advice is definitely something that people utilizing AI within their businesses need to be mindful of. And I think, Pete, when you were talking about utilizing AI for the discovery and the engagement, I think we were talking about it before the session is, yes, absolutely use it for file notes, etc. But it's that context and the, additional insights that you can drive from the client based on not necessarily what they're saying, but what they're not saying. That should also be documented on the client file as well. So again, you can use AI as the basis, but make sure that there's human oversight to ensure that what is actually the output of that, file note, for example, is actually what took place.
Yeah, I think Lisa from Integrity Compliance put a great post on LinkedIn the other night, which talked about that. She was finding that some of the outcomes from file noting apps was looking a bit cookie cutter from their perspective on audits. So, I don't think we're at a stage where we can just completely take our hand off the steering wheel and let the AI do everything for us. Unfortunately. So I just have a couple of sort of final comments around from just a purely tech perspective, what to do with AI. So I think there is a bunch of FOMO with AI at the moment, where I think some businesses have been lured into this sense that if we're not using AI, we're going to get left behind. And that may be true over the next 5 years, but it's not true over the next 5 weeks. So we've gotten by pretty well without AI for a long time. And there are lots of very clever people trying to work through this whole AI piece at the moment. And I think what we are really looking to see is really thoughtful AI implementations from some of our major software providers in the near future of how we best use AI. So I think there's going to be some very big long-term game-changing things with AI, but maybe in the short term I think we're going to go through a period where we get a bit underwhelmed, frankly. I think some people are already there, quite frankly. And this sort of happened, if you sort of think about the .com boom, where, everyone went crazy adding the name .com to their businesses, and there was a bit of a tech crash, and everyone sort of thought, there was a lot of people back then who thought that, I remember once a consultant wrote a paper at Amazon, said they should stop being a website business and just go back to being a bookstore. So I think there is a transformational thing happening here, but even the web and cloud and mobile trends that built out, they've taken decades to sort of play through, and I think AI is going to take decades as well. So look, taking a step back, pausing, not a bad thing. You're not going to miss out. It's really what I'd say. So our sort of playbook, integrate, don't isolate. So really, we think AI works best where it's sitting right next to the data that you're actually using. So the more discrete AI apps you start using in your world that are not connected to your data sources, the less effective they'll be, and potentially you may have unintended consequences of being quite dependent on those apps in the future. I'd also say that a lot of these AI apps are very expensive for what they actually offer, and we would expect that some will get substantially cheaper. Every time OpenAI releases a new ChatGPT model, it puts thousands of startups out of business because it starts offering stuff effectively for free out of the box as well. So I think that's sort of part of it, and we see enormous capability being rolled out by Microsoft, particularly at the moment, where people have the capability to build their own co-pilots at the moment within their own businesses. That will become quite a standard thing people do in the future, and I think that's your best bet, is actually thinking about how can we do those things in the future as well. I think AI is going to be in everything. So I think personally, whether your advice software, whether it's Xplan or whatever, will have AI capabilities in the next 3 years. Yes, I think they're going to be bloody slow. Our providers are not known for being that innovative and adding new features, but I think they will just have to inevitably start adding AI features to what they do. And I think every bit of software you use. So we're really sort of trying to understand what are the roadmaps of the software vendors that our companies use, and is there potential AI applications that they'll be building in the future. Just do the vigorous due diligence piece. Danny in our business is big on this, but are these businesses actually going to stand the test of time, or have they just raised a bit of capital and are they going to disappear on us? And there we end up with a bunch of data we can't access. And just the final obvious one, but you don't get too distracted by this stuff. Like these should be sort of quite obvious things that we do. There's a lot of, as Fraser mentions, there's a lot of AI things out there which I think are looking for a problem to solve rather than solving a problem. And so we have seen instances where some advice businesses have sort of got really distracted with some of these AI projects and maybe lost sight of the day job. So that's just a final point there, Celine, on the AI caper.
Thank you so much for that. Might just take control back of the slides. And Fraser, I think, as part of the framework that we've developed, we've tried to have, like I mentioned at the start of the session, different lenses to the use of AI. So we're certainly not saying don't use it. If anything, your businesses are ultimately probably using it. So what kind of, parameters do you need to have in place? What kind of guardrails do you need to have in place? And in building out the AI framework, we've, kind of touched on a couple of these core areas that businesses should really be thinking about. So let's start obviously with the ethical considerations to begin with. I mean, obviously, fairness, accountability, transparency, we've already spoken about. What else from an ethical lens do businesses need to think through?
Yeah, I think essentially the codes that you work under, it's really around the concept of, putting yourself in that situation and working out, are you using this these tools for what purpose and what the outcome's going to be, and are you doing that transparently? Are you doing that in a way that's ethical to the people that you're doing it with? And have you told them, have you actually got permission to use their information in these tools? Because I think, and Pete mentioned this earlier, one of the first sort of things that we look at is go, what are your privacy policies? Do they declare or disclose to your clients that you might be using AI tools? And let's face it, pretty much everything's going to have AI in it, if not already, whether it's within your email system, your Copilot, in your CRM, whatever it might be, it's all going to have AI at some point. So I think probably one of the earlier call to action should be around that, making sure that you're letting your clients know that you're using, that some of the tools that you use are probably going to, or most likely going to, have an AI component in it. And from an ethical standpoint, what your decision around what you choose to share with those tools, based on that client's personal information, are you using personal identifiable information as defined by the Privacy Act, or are you just using general or generic information on a persona of somebody that might be like your client? And so, obviously, if we're doing, marketing tools or rewording some of our website using ChatGPT or something, it's probably less of an ethical consideration. But if you're doing anything specifically, and when you start getting into that, file notes of conversations that you've had with clients, are you really getting into that ethical point of view where you haven't told necessarily the client that this information is being being looked at by a machine and transcribed, or what it might be? And then, of course, from your governance point of view, is then, have you done the due diligence on those products? Where is that data being stored? How is it being worked? Is it being kept on servers domiciled in Australia? Are you breaching your privacy obligations by downloading it to a tool that doesn't adhere to the Australian privacy principles? And so there's a lot of those ethical boundaries, whilst they might be quite clear, sometimes quickly get pulled away by because you haven't actually done the due diligence on the product itself.
Yeah. And I think just on the ethical use of AI as well, it's also, you're ultimately responsible for identifying and ultimately mitigating any biases within the systems as well. So again, I think to your earlier point around transparency, if you're using AI for marketing and relatively, non-personal information, that's a completely different set of ethical considerations versus if you're actually using it in the provision of advice. And again, if we're ultimately responsible for the provision of advice, it's making sure that we can identify and mitigate and continually monitor for any biases in those systems as well. Pete, do you have anything further to add on the ethical considerations on the use of AI?
Look, I think it's just like everything in life, right? It's a disclosure issue. It's just, if you were in the client's shoes, would you want to know that, that you were potentially using AI with some of their data and information? And I'd say for a lot of clients, it'd probably be yes.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to risk management, and one of the things that we've tried to incorporate into the framework is making sure that the business actually does undertake a bit of a risk assessment of AI tools that are being utilized. I mean, I think one of the things, and we'll touch on this as part of our top 3 tips, is do you actually even know the types of AI tools that are being used? You as a business owner may feel that AI isn't being utilized, but your staff members may actually be utilizing tools that you're not even aware of. So Fraser, from a risk management perspective, what are the core steps or key considerations that we need to think through?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to this. One is that you go and you do your research and you ask, do they have security, a cybersecurity framework that they adhere to? Are their team members, doing certain things like maybe having multi-factor authentication when they log in, or maybe they can't access your client's information, etc. There's some things that you can uncover with that. But the other part of this is around documenting that you asked. And so if something, and one of my, tips as a rule around thinking forward, what could possibly go wrong with this, and therefore what am I doing now that could stop that going wrong in the future, is if you have a problem, or if they have a problem, if they get hacked, for example, and it comes back that you actually just use this tool blindly because you did no risk assessment, then that could be a real issue for your business. And whilst you can do a risk assessment and say, get the information and make the decision, this is the part that, make the decision and document that decision, which is part of what this framework's about, having that template there to be able to make that decision and say, actually, you know what, we're not happy with this tool. And then we can let our team know that we're not happy with this tool, or we're happy with this tool so long as it's used in this particular way without client, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can communicate to that. So, there's the getting the information, going for a deep dive into the privacy settings and working out what they do and don't do and where they hold your data. As Pete mentioned, are they still going to be around in 5 years' time to be able to get your data out if that's an issue? And we're going to have some more problems with the new Privacy Act when it comes out as to how does the client know what data is being held and when can they, what's the time frame? And so there's those the bit itself where you go deep dive in, the making the assessment, the call, actually documenting the call and being able to provide that as evidence.
Absolutely. And I think just even from a business sense as well, it's actually identifying but also implementing controls to mitigate any new risks that AI ultimately poses to your business and your business processes as well. So, if you're not really mature on privacy and your cyber risks and your cyber obligations, it's like think really carefully about how AI is then going to be integrated into that, because ultimately your privacy and your cyber frameworks and your response to incidents, etc., all plays into how you're utilizing AI in your business as well. Pete, anything further from you on that point?
No, I don't. I think you guys have covered off really, really well. The only thing I'd say is with the number of tools, we find a lot of our tech discoveries that when we go and interview staff in a business, they find out, advice owners might find out that staff are using things they didn't know about. We certainly don't advocate for draconian blocking of apps and things, because let's face it, people can just do stuff on their phone anyway or whatever. But I think creating a culture where people actually disclose what the tools they're using and systems and all those things is really, really important. Having that documented is critical. Yeah.
And on data.
And just on that, sorry, when it comes to teams and culture, I think it's really important that maybe if you want to find that out, put that on the agenda of the next team meeting and have the conversation as to say, what do you know? Are we going to allocate 10 minutes to the team meeting to, what's somebody doing in these tools and knowing what you're doing, I think, and making sure that there's a space or a safe space to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think, data governance and security we've touched on throughout the course of this session, but are there any particular, focus areas? Again, making sure that you've actually got a data governance structure in place is probably a good starting point, but Pete, is there anything from your perspective that when you are assessing data and AI, anything that you need to really think through?
Well, obviously, the first one is that the AI solutions, where is their data stored? Are they on onshore or offshore servers? Most of them are using offshore, from what I can gather. There's a few here locally that are onshore, obvious reasons. This is just fleshed out in due diligence, frankly. And again, this is why we much prefer people using AI, which is tied to their existing data sources like Microsoft SharePoint that are, managed by that provider. I think there will, because of the ongoing issues with cyber going on across the country, I'm expecting much tougher regulations actually in the future on what any businesses that hold any personal data, that they cannot use any offshore things in the future, is probably where we're headed anyway. So I think just be prepared for that. That's my view.
Yeah. And Fraves, obviously from a cybersecurity perspective, I mean, it's critical, especially where we are utilizing sensitive client information, etc. Any top tips for you?
Yeah, obviously financial services has the most information on a client, and each advice firm has more information than the bank or the or the platforms on each particular client, and so it's very, very valuable information and needs to be protected as such. The the governance piece, it really just means that it always falls back on the director of the business. If your team are using something or they do the wrong thing, you're, as the director of the business, you're responsible. And so making sure that you do make sure that this is a part of the topic of the team meeting, so that everybody talks about what they do. So due diligence is important, making sure that you're not going to get caught later on for this.
Yeah, and also from a governance oversight perspective too. So especially if you are financial services licensees, ultimately deciding which governance forums will oversee the use of AI. So as a part of your risk and compliance committees, where are you actually addressing and identifying some of the issues that may come about? How are you assessing the risks? Are you establishing new forums, or are you kind of integrating this into existing forums as well? Interestingly, and I'm not sure if either of you have seen any implications, but is there any impact on PI or cyber policies as a result of AI? Have either of you seen any of that come through at all?
So there's a lot of different aspects to this, because we always just think about our own business and AI. Every other business is using AI too. So insurers are starting to use AI to look at these sorts of things, to see what you're saying about yourself on your website. Security products are all using AI to, like your malware products and your antiviruses are all using AI as well. So it's not that the impacting on the actual policies themselves, because if you've done something silly in your business, then you're going to be liable for that anyway. But I think it's more around the concept of just understanding from the ecosystem point of view, the insurers are going to be using AI as well. So a lot of the time that's picking up on a lot more information.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say to add to that is that I do think small businesses like what we do is more particularly exposed because of AI, because obviously scams and fraud and those things are easier to execute using AI. Voice impersonation software, the quality of phishing scams is becoming a lot better. So I think there's that sort of cyber side is going to be far more important, because it's going to be a lot harder to detect what is a scam and what is legit, quite frankly, as well. Yeah.
And on the implementation strategy, again, I think we're encouraging businesses to utilize AI, but to do so safely. So for those that are actually going down the path, or likely have gone down the path, again, as part of the framework that we've developed, there is a bit of a risk assessment to make sure that you are at least considering the key elements of, the AI tools and potential risks that they may pose for your business. But what else do we need to think through when we're looking at implementing a strategy around AI?
I also think the big thing is the training of the team. So once you have approved a product, have an approved a list of products that the business is allowed to use and how they're allowed to use them. But if you're not training your team, then you've got no recourse to come back to say, well, they were using this thing and they were never trained not to, or told not to use it. So having that approved list and having a process in place to say, if you find a new tool that you want to use, here is the process that we need to run through. We need to bring it back to your risk and compliance committee or whatever it might be, and assess it and do a risk assessment on it, and then make the decision and go forward from there. So I'm making sure that all the team members understand what that process is to find a new tool and to implement it.
Yeah, and I just add to that consequences if people do go off the reservation and start using tools outside of that, puts the business at enormous risk. And I think there should be consequences well understood for staff members, advisors under a licensee, for doing that. Carrot and stick.
Yeah, but I think to that earlier point, I mean, some businesses aren't even aware that their team members are actually using AI. So it's actually establishing the guardrails up front to say we actually now do have a formalized framework in place. We're not telling you can't use it, but these are the ones that we've assessed as being, safe and secure for our business or appropriate for our business, and this is how we expect you to use it. And if you do go outside of that remit, then the consequences of that, absolutely. Which I think brings us to the framework itself, which again, you can download and access for free through the cybercollective.com.au/AI framework. And again, we've kind of collectively decided to come up with this framework ourselves. It is a starting point. Please feel free to utilize it and evolve it. The framework consists of, as we've mentioned, an AI policy that kind of sets the guardrails for how AI could be utilized within your business. We've also provided a sample of a risk assessment checklist that covers and touches on, those elements that Fraser spoke about around privacy and data storage, etc., as well as formalizing a process for assessing new AI tools so that, either yourself as the business owner or your team members that are looking at utilizing AI technologies have got a bit of a checklist of things that they need to consider and work through. Fraser, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
So this is, as I said, this is a template. You download it and you can take it apart and do whatever you like with it from here. We came together and created this based on conversations with each other. It's a free resource. We're not charging for it. So, what you do with it after this is your responsibility, I guess. We don't want to certainly turn around and say this is the be all and end all, but it's certainly a really good starting point for businesses to be able to start implementing something straight away. And even if they want to expand on that and change it, it won't always stay like this, I guess, being the point. And so we're like any document, there's a document control area where you say, well, this might be our review process as of June 2024, but maybe we'll reassess it in 6 months or 12 months time and update that document. So I think that's probably the two things I would add to that. Yep.
Pete, anything further from you on that?
Yeah, I just think this will probably have a period of time where it's really required, when obviously we've just got so many new specific AI tools that we've been asked to use. But I think over time, as AI becomes more of a feature of products that we tend to use every day, this tool will probably have a different level of relevance, but it'll be more about assessing, do we turn on those features? How do we use them? Those things. So it'll take a different shape from just pure due diligence, I suggest, over time. But I think this is a really critical thing to have. And I do know, heard from a few licensees who have told us that ASIC, the regulator, has been writing to some of the major licensees asking for what are their usage of AI, what are they using. So there is interest here. So I think having this in your back pocket and having something ready to go would be time well spent.
And I think that was ultimately the risk and the gap that our respective businesses were identifying, which is the conduit behind why we decided to establish this framework as well, is that there weren't even basic policies in place by businesses. So we knew that businesses were utilizing it, but there was really no guardrails and parameters around appropriate usage. So that was pretty much the premise behind why we decided to come together and build out this tool, which hopefully you all find useful. So as we finish off, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground. There's obviously, it's evolving. Things are going to change. We're going to learn more and more about it, identify new risks, identify new opportunities. So to try and summarize it all, I guess the top 3 things to do. Fraser, do you want to step through any of these in particular?
Yes, obviously, go ahead and please download. Happy for you to share that link if you want to with other colleagues around as well. It's not, as we said, it's a free resource. It's for the profession. It's not, we're not holding on to that IP really tightly or anything. The big things to me are get something in place quickly. have it in place, and then review and make sure that you can train your team on it, but review it and upgrade it often, and do the work. Obviously I'm a big fan of the authenticity piece of AI, how you use that and why, the ethical side of it. And I've harped on about that for a fair bit, but I think that the big things are make sure you got a privacy policy set up, make sure you got some policy set up with the framework, get your team trained, get it underway.
I think the second point is obviously just risk assessing your business and the solutions, again, as you're likely utilizing existing AI solutions. So do a bit of an inventory and a stock take and make sure that, your team members are actually aware of what is appropriate to use versus what is definitely out. And I think, Pete, to your point, identify the problems that you want to solve rather than being led by the next shiny new toy. Like, what are you actually trying to solve for, and make sure that you have a purpose fit solution.
Well said.
Okay. On that note, so thank you all for joining us again. Please feel free to access a copy of the AI framework through the website. And again, if you require any help in practically applying any elements of that framework, feel free to get in touch with our respective businesses. If you do end up utilizing the framework, please feel free to share any feedback with us as well. So that is all, unless anyone else has got anything else to cover off on. I think we can call it a day. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Cheers.
See ya.